This is Paul Schmid. Welcome to the Pursuit Zone. Mike Summers is an outdoor enthusiast with a passion for hiking. In December 2016, he set out westbound to complete the Ice Age Trail in winter. It's one of the 11 National Scenic Trails and exists entirely in the state of Wisconsin. It took Mike 58 days to thru-hike the 1,077 miles. You can learn more about the Ice Age Trail at iceagetrail.org and more about Mike at improbablebutpossible.com. Mike Summers, welcome to the Pursuit Zone.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Mike, where did you grow up?
So I was born in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I lived there for the first 11 years of my life. And then I moved to the suburbs of Chicago, to Glen Ellen, Illinois. And I spent the next 11 years of my life there.
How did you get involved in hiking?
So I hadn't really done a lot of hiking until like my mid-20s. But when I had moved to Illinois, I started a band and we got pretty serious and we started touring around the country. So I got really used to being in a new place every day, meeting new people, and kind of just having a different lifestyle than just the typical American dream. And so I kind of have always been an explorer. And as the band started to dissolve, I looked forward and was wondering how I could continue with that exploration. And so I just naturally found backpacking, and it seemed to be perfect. I could just go do that.
What was the name of the band?
The band is Dorian's Decay, and we broke up in 2012. We were like a hardcore rock band. That was a lot of fun.
What instrument did you play?
I played drums.
Wow, drummer.
Yeah.
What's that like to play drums? I mean, is it super difficult and very what's the word I want to use? It just looks hard to play the drums.
I mean, I love playing the drums. It's just in me. I'm always banging on stuff, and honestly, sometimes I annoy people and get on their nerves, and I don't even realize it because I'm just like tapping or making a beat. I don't know. I always notice the rhythm and everything. And in terms of drumming, I guess it is difficult, but it's all about muscle memory and repetition, and
I think that the drum
eventually. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think the drummer's the most underappreciated member of the band, because if you're in a rock band and the drummer is bad, the whole band is bad. You got to have a drummer that is keeps the time and does it right.
Yeah, like the highest standard is for the drummer. Like if the drummer's good, then it's like, oh yeah, that's normal. Okay, whatever.
So this was not your first thru hike. What was your first thru hike?
How do you define thru hike?
I guess I define thru hike as you start at the beginning and you go all the way until you reach the end.
Okay. So my first thru hike was the Timberline Trail around Mount Hood in Oregon. And it's a 42-mile trail that kind of hovers right around the timberline of the mountain. So that was kind of my first complete hike of a designated route.
And how long did that take?
That was 2.5 days.
Where did you get the idea for doing the Ice Age Trail and wanted to do a much longer thru hike?
Since I first started backpacking, I just have slowly done bigger and bigger trips and just wanted to push myself more and more and just see what I could do. And I think a big reason why I wanted to keep going bigger and bigger is because of some of my idols. Some of the people in backpacking at the time that I've been looking up to were accomplishing these massive, just ridiculous hikes. And I was kind of looking up to them like, okay, if I want to do something as crazy as, for example, the C2C route, which Andrew Skirka hiked, that goes from coast to coast and connects a bunch of trails. If I want to do something like that, then kind of what are my building blocks going to have to be? So I started, with the Timberline Trail, 42 miles, a couple days. And the next hike for me was the Pacific Northwest Trail, which is another National Scenic Trail that goes from Glacier National Park to the Pacific Ocean. And that one's about 1,200 miles, and it was about 53 days. It was kind of like my first really long. And I just kept pushing my limits. And so one of the next barriers for me was hiking in winter. I'd never done a winter hike or really much winter camping at all, just a couple of nights. So, that's how I got turned on to the Ice Age Trail, I guess.
What is the Ice Age Trail? What do people need to know about it?
Well, it's essentially a route that connects all the geologic remnants from the past ice age. And Wisconsin actually has one of the highest concentrations in the whole world for glacial geologic remnants. And so a lot of people come to research to Wisconsin, and also it's really fun to recreate in these places too. So the trail basically just hits all the coolest parts of Wisconsin. And one more thing you should know about it is that the Ice Age Trail Alliance is the group that maintains and builds the trail. And they do a great job at what they do. And just wanted to give everybody over there a shout out.
Yeah, you had a chance to stop there during your hike. What was that experience like?
Oh, it was really great. It was near the halfway point of the trail. So it was nice to just stop in. Actually, I was about a few miles out walking on the road. A car stops and a couple people get out and they're like, "Oh, hey, we work over at the Ice Age Trail Alliance. We figured we'd see you walking around one of these days." And I had been talking with them through email, but hadn't met them yet. So I kind of met them right there on the road, and they offered me a ride, but I said I got to walk it because you actually have to walk all the road sections of the Ice Age Trail as well as the trail sections in order to be considered what they call a 1,000-miler, someone who's completed the whole trail. So nevertheless, I got to their headquarters, and I had arranged for somebody from the Wisconsin State Journal, Barry, to come over and give me an interview because he wanted to write up a story about the trip. So, it was a bunch of people who kind of, like at the Ice Age Trail Alliance, everybody's job is to promote, work on, and kind of maintain, build, preserve the trail, and acquire it as well. They kind of do all of that. So they're pretty pumped when people are hiking it because that's kind of, I feel like they do it so people can hike it, So it's cool to share that experience and kind of just be able to just have that common bond with these people I've never met. But then also there was kind of the newspaper guy there asking everybody questions, and we were all eating pizza and drinking beer, and it was just a jolly old time. And their headquarters is actually set up for hikers to come through. Like, they have a shower in the basement, and there's a few people in town that offered me a place to stay. So I gladly took them up on that.
Mike, how long did it take you to prepare for this hike?
So I had been thinking about doing this hike for a couple of years. Well, it was probably about a year before. That's when I really started planning for it. So yeah, it was kind of tough to plan for it because I didn't know really what was going to happen. I didn't know what it was going to be like because nobody had ever hiked it in winter. So every trip report and all the information that they have is geared toward 3-season hikers. So that's why I spent so long researching and making sure I knew what gear I needed before I invested all the money into it. Because I was going to have to invest a lot of money into all this winter gear.
So what are you most worried about before doing this hike? I would think you would be most worried about just being too cold. Is that the thing you're most worried about?
I really wasn't all that concerned about my safety. Maybe that's because I did so much research that I knew the gear I had was pretty solid. But really, my biggest fear going into this was I didn't want to fail, because I had this idea of I wanted to thru-hike the Ice Age Trail in winter. I wanted to be the first guy to do it, right? And so the way I saw it, I have to tell everybody about it, and I have to kind of announce my plan before I go through with it, and then kind of stay true to my word. So my biggest fear was telling all these, just telling the world, I guess, that, hey, I'm going to go hike the Ice Age Trail, and then getting out there and just not being able to actually do it. And I think that scared me so much that I put so much effort into the research and planning that by the time I got on the trail, I was like, oh man, this is a lot. I don't know. I guess it was more straightforward than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be a lot more difficult. It was just a big unknown.
Before you started, your snowshoes got stolen. How did that happen?
Yeah, it was the funniest thing. I had just gotten back from a shakedown hike because I just wanted to make sure I had all the right gear before I fly out to Wisconsin. I was living in Portland at the time. So before I fly out there, I just want to make sure I got everything. And if I need to change something out, I could do it in the last week before my trip or whenever I was scheduled to fly out there. So I go on this shakedown hike, and I come back, and it's late at night, and I'm really tired, and I have my backpack full of all my gear in the car, and I actually had 4 other backpacks that I was gear testing, and I was testing all those on that outing as well. And then I also had my guitar in there and the snowshoes and a few other things. And so I was so tired, and I just left the car out there. I didn't lock it. I'm a pretty trusting person, so I just decided, oh, it'll be fine. And I go inside and I lay down to go to bed. And then all of a sudden I have this idea oh, I should probably dry out the shelter I was using so it stays in good condition. So I went and I grabbed my backpack full of all my gear and I brought it to inside, and I laid out the tarp so it could dry. And I went to bed. And then I wake up in the morning and I go out to get the rest of my stuff, and it's all gone. The snowshoes are gone, the guitar is gone, the backpacks are gone. Somebody had stolen them out of the car. And so I was like, oh man.
Where was this at?
This was in Portland, in Selwood. It's a quiet neighborhood, pretty unexpected, I guess. But yeah, I guess as devastating as it was, that to be oh crap, now I have to get new snowshoes and all that stuff was stolen. Well, I was like, well, good thing I went and grabbed my backpack full of all my gear last night. Otherwise, they would have taken that too. So I saw it almost as a sign. All right, I'm meant to complete this trip because all my gear didn't get stolen. Just my snowshoes.
How do you get to the start?
So, yeah, I flew from Portland to Chicago because I have friends in Chicago. So I flew in there and actually had Jim York ship me a new pair of snowshoes to Illinois. And then my friend drove me to the trailhead, my friend Billy Taylor, who played in the band with me. He drove me to the start.
What did you find to be the main challenges of the route? You mentioned before a lot of road walking. What kind of what was the percentage of road walking versus trail walking?
It was probably about 40% roads and 60% trails. It was kind of a lot of road walking. So that, I mean, that's a challenge in itself. Just like the monotony of walking on a road past a bunch of farms. But I found ways to enjoy road walking, if you can believe it. I would bring books and just read as I walk, or I would listen to podcasts like this one, or I would listen to music. I mean, those were kind of the main things that kept me occupied out there on the roads. But one of the biggest challenges was the footing, like the tread I was walking on, because it would switch so much. There'd be like a couple miles of road, and then it would go to like a snowy section where I'd need snowshoes, and that would be a few miles long. And then it would switch to like maybe a really heavily used trail that was all packed down snow and turned to ice. And so I'd have to switch over to the ice spikes, and then I'd be on the road again. So now I'd have to put it all, on my backpack and continue. So it felt like I was constantly changing footwear systems. And then with the weather, when you're in the forest, there's less wind. Then when you go out on the road, it's super windy. So constantly having to change layers as well. It was super challenging. I kind of just had to accept that, all right, everything moves slower in the winter. Like, it's just going to take me 15 minutes to change my footwear. And that's just how it is. It's going to take me 5 minutes to take off a layer.
How were you navigating? Did you use paper maps or did you use GPS?
I started with both, with paper maps and GPS. And as much as I wanted to use paper maps, they just weren't super useful. And what I found was that the app that I was using, the GPS app called Mammoth Tracks, was working really well and was just a million times easier to use than the maps. And I mean, I like paper maps, but they're more helpful when the terrain actually has some significant changes in elevation, like when there's mountains or ridges and things. But in Wisconsin, there's not a lot of features. So most of the time, you're just following roads or trails which are really well blazed. And at that point, you only really need the maps to figure out your mileages, like how far it is to the next town or things like that, like how far till maybe the next campsite or something. And so with the Mammoth Tracks app, it would tell you where you are on the map, and then it would tell you how far you are away from different landmarks. So it was kind of just doing all the work for me. So at a certain point, I got rid of the maps, the paper maps. Not that, I liked them, but they just weren't working as conveniently, I guess, because I had a smartphone and I had the app. So yeah, it worked really well.
Were the maps any type of a special Ice Age trail map that you ordered from online somewhere? How did you get those maps?
Yeah, so the maps, it's the Ice Age Trail Atlas, and I think they just came out with a new version for 2017. But yeah, those maps are really nice, especially for section hikers, because they're all broken down by like segments, and they make a lot of sense that way. They're not necessarily geared toward thru hikers, because there's not many people who have even thru hiked the Ice Age Trail. But I liked the maps. I just found that the Mammoth Tracks was more convenient.
Does the Alliance, are they the ones that sell those maps?
Yeah, they sell the Atlas, and then I think they must have something to do with that Mammoth Tracks app. I guess they make that too.
So when you don't have somebody like the Alliance or somebody nearby the Alliance that offers you a place to stay at night, where are you camping? What's your camping setup?
So I prefer to cowboy camp, which is just camping underneath the stars, just like on a sleeping pad and then a sleeping bag, basically. On the Ice Age Trail, there are a few shelters, but there's just a few for the entire route. And then there's some campsites that are designated, but there's just some. So the rest of the time, you're kind of on your own. And a lot of the times, there's just like farms, rural farmland for miles on a road walk. And there's just no possible place to camp. And so what I would do is just kind of, I would look on my map and see, oh, there's like a stand of trees that's not really near a house at all. You know, it's kind of just right next to the road, but not near anything, just in a bunch of farms. So I would just kind of dip off the road and just camp in there. I'm not the type to spend much time in camp. Most of my time was spent hiking, especially in the winter. I'm doing a lot of hiking in the dark as well. So I'd hike into the dark and then, just find a place to sleep. And that's all I would do there, basically, is just sleep and then wake up in the morning and keep going. And I did my best to leave no trace and not bother anybody and just kind of stay out of the way.
How often were you hiking at night?
A lot. A lot of the time. Because it would get dark, 4:30. I guess like it's starting to again.
Doesn't that isn't that get creepy being out there in the dark in the cold by yourself?
I mean, there's nothing out there. Like all the bears are hibernating. Everyone's inside.
Yeah, maybe
All the
that's
animals can hear you crunching around, so there's no animals near you. 'Cause
yeah.
they're like getting
get,
away from whatever that thing is.
I guess creepy isn't the word I wanted to use. It's just
It's still. It's very still. And okay, it can be eerie. I guess that there was one night where I was walking and I was like, oh my gosh, there's like wolves watching me or something. I just got this weird feeling. Because I guess I had been reading Call of the Wild, which is about wolves. So maybe that was why.
just a follow-up question on your cowboy camping setup. So do you have I'm guessing you must have some type of a ground sheet and then like a air mattress and a sleeping bag?
Yeah, pretty much. For most of the trip, I used a closed cell foam pad kind of as my ground sheet. And then I would have air mattress, like the Neo Air X Therm, the winter one. And then, a sleeping bag. And that was it.
And
it was super warm.
You used a down bag?
Yes, I had a Feathered Friends sleeping bag. So it kind of had like a waterproof breathable thing on the outside. And that was, I found to be very, very important, especially when you're cowboy camping, because you'll wake up and there'll be frost all over the outside of your bag. So to be able to just brush it off real quick was pretty helpful. But my clothing system also kind of went into my sleep system and kind of tied into it. Since it was like down insulation, I wanted to keep it dry, so I would use a vapor barrier to keep my skin's vapor next to itself, I guess, so it wouldn't seep into the down.
So inside of your bag, you have like another bag that you're in, like a vapor barrier bag?
Well, actually, I had vapor barrier clothing. So I had like vapor barrier socks, vapor barrier pants, vapor barrier jacket, and gloves, and a hat and everything, and like a face mask. Like I was decked out in vapor barrier gear. This company, RBH Designs, makes custom vapor barrier liners, and yeah, their stuff is really awesome.
So when you get to camp and you decide it's time to go to sleep, do you change your clothes at all, or do you just keep what you have on, including the vapor barrier, and then get into the sleeping bag like that?
Yeah, pretty much I would just get in exactly like I was. I was pretty much wearing base layer and vapor barriers at all times. Whether I was in the bag or walking around, that was pretty much Yeah, always on. Except for like the really warm days.
How did you find the temperatures to be? Was there a lot of temperature swing from cold to hot?
I mean, honestly, it was a really warm winter, and that's not at all what I wanted. I wanted a really cold winter because I'd done so much research that I'd scared myself into thinking that the extreme temperatures could be possible at any moment. So I needed to be prepared for them at any moment. And so I was basically prepared for negative double digits, and I only experienced that like once or twice. So most of the time I was carrying all that gear in my backpack on my back and kind of regretting it. And then when it was really cold, I was like, okay, yeah, I'm glad I have this stuff.
So what are you eating? Where are you eating? And are you finding it a challenge at all to get water?
No, water was relatively straightforward. The trail passes through so many towns that there's plenty of opportunities for resupply and for getting water from wherever. So pretty much my diet consisted of a bunch of snacks and then like a meal at dinner. For example, I would try to do like 10 snacks throughout the day and have each snack be like 4,000 calories or something. Or sorry, not 4,000, 400. So yeah, so it'd be like 10 400 calorie snacks and then like a dinner that was like 600 calories or maybe like 1,000. And yeah, that's what I would try to eat. Now, about halfway through the hike, I realized I wasn't quite getting enough food. I was always hungry and I was cold. And so I upped it to like 6,000 calories a day. And that was a lot better. But it gets difficult because when you have like, 12 to 15 snacks you're supposed to eat during the day, I mean, you're eating like every 45 minutes. You're eating like a 400 calorie snack. So it's kind of difficult to eat that much. I mean, I definitely wanted to eat all that. But then it's like you can't eat 12 snacks of almonds, because you just won't be able to like put it down. So I would just have to get whatever I was craving. And a lot of times it was Pop-Tarts and Cheez-Its and, just the worst kind of like snacks for you. But a lot of those things are prepackaged and it made it really easy. And a lot of gas stations carry that stuff too. There's a ton of gas stations along the trail.
What flavor of Pop-Tarts?
Oh, I like all flavors. I really do. I like to change it up. But yeah, in terms of water, I would either get it in town or melt snow, or sometimes you get it through like a river or something. But half the time those are frozen over. So melting snow was definitely a thing I did. And with the stove I just use an alcohol stove. So it's Trail Designs makes the titanium caldera cone, and I use that with a 1.3 liter Evernew pot. And that was a really good system for melting snow. And then I would burn heat, which you can get at any gas station. It's called HEET. It's like a yellow bottle, gasoline antifreeze. And that stuff burns really cleanly, but it burns at a lower temperature. So it just takes a while to melt snow, and you'll have to like refill it up a few times and spend an hour or two in camp just melting snow for the next day or whatever. But one benefit to melting the snow is that you can get it really warm and put it in your water bottle and then put it at the bottom of your sleeping bag and keep your feet warm.
Did you consider yourself ultralight on this trip? And I'm wondering also, what was your base weight?
My base weight was about 20 pounds, and I would consider it ultralight, but I would also consider it a little bit overkill for the conditions I encountered. Like, if it was going to be below freezing or I mean below 0 degrees the entire trip, then the gear I had would have been perfect. The reality of it, though, is most of the time it was around freezing. So, yeah, a lot of the gear I had worked best when it was below 25 degrees. So if it was ever above that, I kind of hated life because that means I had more gear in my backpack and I was just sweating. And that means stuff was getting wet too, which was more of a challenge. So although all my gear was ultralight, I just had a lot of it. I had too much. But I mean, on a trip like that, I didn't know what I was getting into. I wanted to stay safe. I didn't want to freeze to death out there. And so that didn't happen at all.
I'm wondering how your gear held up, and did anything turn out to be your favorite?
The gear held up very well. I plan on using all of it again this winter and probably for many winters to come. The gear that took the most beating was probably my footwear, like the Vargo titanium spikes that I use for ice and the snowshoes as well. And that was just because of the tread sometimes. The spikes especially, I kind of beat the crap out of them because there's just no other option at a certain point. So for example, on one of the road walks, the entire road was kind of covered in a thin sheet of ice. So you can't really walk it without the spikes, but every once in a while it's thin enough where the spikes are just hitting right on the pavement. So it's kind of a constant back and forth between like being on the ice and then being on the pavement. And that's just, when it's cold too, those things they end up breaking. And it's not like they're poorly made or anything, but they're just not designed to be walked on the road like that. But when it takes like 10 minutes to get them all straightened out, they're just not coming off. If there's like a 10-foot stretch of pavement, I'm going to walk on that pavement real quick and keep going. Because, at the end of the day, when I'm through hiking it, when I'm just when I have a goal in mind, there's many more miles to go. Forward progress is kind of the main priority.
Did you have a favorite piece of gear?
I can't say I had a favorite piece of gear, but I can say that all the gear I had was really awesome. And a lot of it worked perfectly.
What was your budget for this? If someone else is looking to, do something similar, what do they need to, save up for? How much money?
So, yeah, this kind of trip is definitely more of an investment than other types of thru hikes might be. Just because in the winter you need more gear and you need expensive. I don't know. I guess you don't necessarily need expensive stuff, but it's kind of like if you don't buy expensive gear, then you're gonna have a super, super heavy pack in the winter. I saved up a few $1,000s and put that towards gear alone, like buying this sleeping bag and all the down layers and just all kinds of stuff. It gets pretty pricey. And when you're trying to keep it light and keep it warm at the same time, then the price is bound to go up. Basically, in order to help me accomplish the hike, after I compiled my gear list and figured out all the gear I wanted, then I looked at certain gear companies that I really liked, that I've been using their gear for a while, or I really like their kind of what they make, their product or their mission or whatever. And I started contacting them and seeing if they'd be willing to support me on the hike. Basically just seeing if they'd be willing to help me out with some gear, if I'd be willing to kind of promote them a little bit. And so that helped with funding the trip a lot. In terms of getting sponsors, I kind of started with like a smaller items that I wanted, like a journal or something, and then I would take that, and now when I would pitch the next largest monetary value of item, then I could include all my previous sponsors as well. So by the time I got to this most expensive sponsor, like that I wanted the most gear from, I had like 6 other sponsors at the time.
Good plan.
Yeah, so I could slowly like build up. That way I'm not coming to some company and saying like, hey, I want all this gear. I'm just some random dude. It was more like, hey, I would like, your gear, but I also have the support from all these other people.
During your presentation, when you showed a lot of these brand names, I'd never heard of them before. I think a lot of people are familiar with all the big name stuff that you can get at REI, but a lot of these companies, I don't know if you're able to name them all, if you can remember them all, but
yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, a lot of them are smaller cottage companies that just make their own gear and have been doing it for years. But yeah, RBH Designs, Mountain Laurel Designs, Northern Lights Snowshoes, Trail Designs, Vargo Outdoors, Right in the Rain, and 40 Below. Yeah, so I couldn't have done the hike without any of their support. I used all their gear all the time, and I'm still gonna use it this winter too, because it worked so well.
Did you have any problems keeping motivated out there?
Not really. In Wisconsin, there's cell phone service everywhere. So if I ever got really kind of bored, or if I ever felt anxious or anything, then I could just find something else to engage me. I could find something to listen to or something like that. But honestly, I do enjoy being out there. I feel more at home when I'm out hiking on the trail than I do when I'm just sitting in an apartment. I don't know. It just feels so much more natural to me to be out in the woods. And then after I've told everybody, hey, I'm going to hike the Ice Age Trail, that's pretty good motivation to keep doing it. Because it's like, all right, now I have to live up to my word.
Did you encounter any trail angels? And I also wondered what your opinion about trail angels is, good or bad.
So I think trail angels are awesome. Okay. Thank you, every trail angel that's ever existed. You guys are doing miracles. I'm serious. But what's funny is, like, I think I've only encountered a trail angel, as most hikers might know, like once or twice. And I feel like most hikers think of a trail angel as somebody who's close to the trail, who knows about the trail, who specifically helps out hikers on that trail during hiking season. For example, on the Appalachian Trail, there are people who every year will go to a certain trailhead and drop off like sodas for the hikers all summer, every day, and give hikers rides to town, and that's what they do every summer. And they consider themselves to be trail angels, and they provide trail magic. I think the Appalachian Trail is where that really got very popular, and as the Pacific Crest Trail started growing in popularity, it kind of spread over to that trail. But some of these other national scenic trails that aren't as well known and don't have as many through hikers like that, they don't necessarily have like trail angels. Because, for example, the Pacific Northwest Trail, I mean, when I hiked it, I only knew of like maybe 15 other people who were hiking it. that entire summer. And so just nobody knew when they were coming through. There wasn't like hundreds of people coming through like you have on the AT. And so on the Ice Age Trail, it's not like you don't have hundreds of people walking down the road together hiking. Thru hikers are few and far between. But now in Wisconsin, although they don't have anybody who, I mean, it's not like they don't have any trail angels, because I think Wisconsin is just kind of full of trail angels and they don't even know it. Because everybody I ran into was the nicest person ever. And not only the people that already knew about the trail, but just people that had no idea what the trail even was. They were very nice as well. I think 7 times I walked into a bar just to get like a burger and a beer, as I'm hiking down the trail. And I would just start talking to some local, and I would just say, I'm out here hiking the Ice Age Trail this winter, and I've been out here this long, and I'm going to go find a campsite. And they would just say, nope, I got a bed. You can come stay at my house, and I'll feed you, and you can take a shower and all that stuff. So just that happened 7 times, just meeting random people like that. And then with social media, I was using Facebook and meeting people through Facebook, and they were offering me places to stay, and it was kind of unreal, the amount of trail magic I was getting. And I remember about like 3 or 4 weeks in, I was like, man, I've slept in, like, there was a 2-week stretch where I spent like 12 out of 14 nights inside at people's house that I had not met before I started the trip. And so I was like, man, I just want to sleep outside. Like, people are too nice. I can't get away from it. Because, I don't know, in the end, I kind of did what I wanted, that experience of just roughing it out there and camping out there every night. But yeah, having these places to stay and awesome people to hang out with, that was definitely one of the most memorable things about the trip. And it turned out to be something that I could never have expected to experience on that trip.
What were the most memorable parts of the journey for you?
Some of my favorite times were when I would be walking at nighttime and the stars were out overhead, and I could just turn off my headlamp and just walk by the light of the stars. Or like if the moon was out, that would help too, walk by the moonlight. But in the winter, the snow is so reflective that you can kind of see where you're going without any artificial lighting. And so just kind of walking for hours in the dark in the woods with no headlamp and still know where I was going, that was such a cool feeling. But yeah, like I said earlier, the people I met, they really made the trip a lot easier, I think. They made it a lot more fun.
Did you have any river crossings?
Yeah, that was one of the things that I was kind of nervous about and didn't know what to expect before I had started. Because when I was doing research, a couple people from the Ice Age Trail Alliance had told me, like, oh yeah, you better watch out for these rivers. I don't think those freeze up in the winter. Luckily, one of them was frozen over, and that was the deeper of the two. But the first one I had to cross was called I think it was called the Prairie River. It was a little bit frozen in the middle, but other than that, it was rushing by. That was a fun river crossing. It was very intense, and I although I wouldn't do it again, I'm glad I did it and went through with it. It was a very intense experience.
Was it really wide, or like how long did it take you to go through?
Yeah, it was probably 50 feet, 100 feet. I'm really bad at estimating that kind of stuff. But I wasn't able to travel across it very fast because it was so cold that I just wasn't able to move my body very fast at all. And the bottom of the river was like a kind of a frozen slush, so my foot would like sink down into it, and so that took up more time as well. And then when I would get to a section that was frozen, I'd have to like break through the ice and then go into the slush and then repeat.
With your bare foot? Busting
Yeah, I went barefoot, yeah. I took my shoes and socks off.
Sounds painful.
It was very painful. It was extremely painful.
So like how deep, or is this like knee deep water?
Yeah, this was like knee deep. Yeah. So that was kind of insane. And then when I got to the other side and I stepped out, I like put my foot on like a tree, on like a root that was sticking out, and it had snow on it, and the snow just like all stuck on my foot because my foot was so frozen. And I was just like, oh my gosh. But yeah, no, like within an hour of hiking after that, I think they were good again. Yeah, it was kind of crazy though.
Well, eventually you get to the end, and what's it like at the end? What's there to greet you?
So at the end, there is a rock with a plaque on it. And it's at St. Croix Falls, which is a really scenic area, right on the border of Wisconsin and Minnesota. And yeah, it was really interesting just to, you get to the end and there's a plaque, boom. But then the next morning, Jim York, the owner of Northern Lights Snowshoes, and his wife, they came out to congratulate me on completing the journey. And I had 2 friends who came out to pick me up to go back to Chicago. And that was Nick Benson and Billy Taylor, who I played in a band with back in the day. So they were there to congratulate me as well, bring me back to the real world.
Were you glad to be back to the real world?
It was a weird feeling because when I'm out there on the trail, it's kind of very certain. Although I don't know where I'm going to end up that day, I kind of know, all right, I'm going to hike. I'm going to make forward progress. There's kind of always the goal in the distance, like the end of the trail. And so every single day, you're just progressing towards that goal. So now that I reached that goal and I was headed back to society, I was kind of like, all right, now what? It was very unsure. And it was kind of unsettling. And then going from kind of rural Wisconsin, like quiet back roads, serene forests in the winter, to being brought back to Chicagoland, where, even an hour outside of Chicago, the traffic noise is just out of this world. That was kind of a shock.
Do you plan on doing any other winter hiking?
Yeah, definitely. I kind of want to try a version of the Timberline Trail, but like a snowshoe version. It's more like a circumnavigation around Mount Hood, but not up at Timberline. Kind of more down on all the. I know there's a bunch of groom trails around there, so I'm thinking I could maybe make a bigger loop around the mountain, and that might be kind of fun.
If you had to do the Ice Age Trail again, what would you do differently?
Well, I'd probably go in a different direction, and I'd probably go in a different season. Not because I didn't like the direction of the season that I went, but just because if I was going to do it again, I'd like to see it at a different time of year. Because I've heard that there's like mad ticks and like mosquitoes that'll just kind of eat you alive out there. I heard a story about somebody who got to a shelter and picked off 125 ticks from that day. And I'm kind of like, is he being serious? But no, they're like being serious. Like there's that many ticks out there. So I'm kind of glad I went in the winter. Maybe I'd pick like fall or spring so I could get some kind of colors.
That's crazy. That's a crazy amount of ticks.
It's kind of gross. Made me happy to be hiking in the winter for sure.
What advice do you have for the next Ice Age Trail winter through hiker?
I guess if I had some advice to give to somebody who was going to hike in the winter, is just go do it. Because if you're the kind of person who's thinking about doing a winter trip, you know, you're already in a pretty small minority of adventurers. So even if you're not sure if you can pull it off, just go for it because you probably can.
The presentation you gave about this at the Outdoor Adventure Expo, was that your first time presenting?
Yeah, it was kind of my first time presenting in front of that many people. I had given a presentation about the Pacific Northwest Trail to like a small classroom at Mount Hood Community College when I was going there.
I just wondered how you found the experience. Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, I had a great time. I thought it went really well.
Mike, how can people find you online?
I have a website at improbablebutpossible.com, and that has just information on past trips I've done, ideas for the future, stuff like that.
Do you have a contact page on there if people want to get a hold of you?
I have an email address. So if you want to contact me, my email is improbablebutpossible@gmail.com.
You got any other projects on the horizon?
Well, right now I'm working on woodblock printmaking. So it's kind of a drastic departure from adventuring. But in terms of adventures, like my next adventures, I've been planning a 2.5-year hike to connect the National Scenic Trails in America by foot. And I've been planning that since 2015. And so the Ice Age Trail was kind of a shakedown hike for that hike. Now, whether that hike is actually going to happen, we'll see. We'll see when the time comes. I think I'm ready. I think I want to do it, and I can do it. So if conditions are favorable, then I suppose it will happen.
That's your mantra, right?
I don't know. I thought it was kind of funny when that you think it's a mantra.
Well, I think you were the one who said that. That's why I wrote it down in my notes.
Oh, is that why? Okay.
But I could be wrong. I don't know.
Yeah. I guess it kind of is like a mantra. It's from The Little Prince, and it's when the Little Prince visits the first planet on his way to Earth. There's a king there, and the king like he like rules everything in the universe, and so everything in the universe obeys him, but he only orders everything in the universe to do exactly what it is able to do. So that's kind of where I got it from, because there's a point where the Little Prince wants a sunset, and the king is like, okay, I'll order the sun to set. And the Little Prince is like, well, when? And he's like, well, about 8:20 this evening is when conditions are favorable, And then you'll see how well the sun obeys me. It's like, it's perfect.
So for your big 2.5-year trip, have you set yourself a start date?
Yeah, the start date that I set was January 1st, 2018. I probably won't start though then. So now the start date might be January 1st, 2019. That sounds like a good start date.
Why not?
Yeah. Start in Florida, Key West. So that's why I started in January.
Okay, Mike Summers from improbablebutpossible.com. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure talking.
You're welcome. Recorded December 7, 2017. For more great podcasts, visit thepursuitzone.com.